Well, greetings, everybody. It's good being with you all today. It is my distinct pleasure to have Ann Gehring with us today. Ann and I've known each other now for a couple years. She joined our Women in Entrepreneurship Institute board and has done some other programs with us at the Coleman Center, and reached out to get her thoughts on entrepreneurship and her background. And I really look forward to having you today. So Ann, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So the classic entrepreneurship journey story, would love to hear yours.
So I don't know if mine is the classic entrepreneurship story, but I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my grandfather was a German immigrant and he owned his own bakery. It was a very successful bakery. So you can imagine being a little kid and your grandfather owns his own bakery. To this day, I can eat a coffee cake in one sitting. So my father at the same time owned his own pharmacy. So when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time working, for my father and my grandfather in their own small businesses. So I kind of grew up around entrepreneurship. I'm a lot older than the students that we're talking to, and in the era that I grew up, it was kind of unusual to have a woman who felt a passion for science and math, and I did, and I wasn't necessarily the best math student. I always like to say I was the worst math student in the hardest math class, but that was enough to get me what I needed. I went to Miami of Ohio and graduated in 1986, and in 1986, PCs were just entering the workplace, and I was sent to GE because I knew what they called Lotus 1-2-3, which is the Excel predecessor. And I was what they called a Kelly girl then. So Bruce, you probably remember that. I was a Kelly girl. There were actually words like
boy,
this.
is that a statement. Right?
How sexist is that?
Yeah.
And I was a Kelly girl, but I ended up staying at GE for 15 years and it changed my life. I lived overseas twice. I lived in Southeast Asia in the early 90s, and then I lived in Europe in the late 90s. I ended up working at GE Capital. I loved being inside a big, complex organization. I was there the entire time I was there. Jack Welch was our CEO and our chairman. And I don't know if you guys still study Jack Welch, but he was as inspirational a leader as, his reputation. He lived up to his reputation. He was really a remarkable leader.
Was it true they always let the bottom 10% of GE employees go every year?
They did, every year.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a rough environment. It was hard. So, we stack ranked everybody.
Did you like Europe or Asia better?
I liked them both, and I liked them for different reasons.
Yeah.
When I went to Asia, there weren't any Americans over there, and there certainly weren't any American women over there doing business. And
so you didn't blend in very well, I take it.
You couldn't blend in. I was 6 inches taller than everybody else, and
Right.
fair skinned. But I loved the people I met there. I lived in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, which is it's a multicultural society, but it's predominantly Muslim. And one of the things that I'm really proud of myself is I went and lived in a Muslim country. And so I feel like I came to a much greater understanding of the people and the religion. And what I learned was just like any other religion, there are people who practice with moderation and there are people who practice with a little more zeal. And it's important for us to separate the two. So anyway, it was a great experience. I was there for 2 years, and I was doing mergers and acquisitions work around Southeast Asia for GE Capital, which was super fun.
Wow,
so
that's great.
Anyway, I spent time in regional banking after I left GE, and then I ended up as part of the turnaround team at Fannie Mae. And I think I did the math, and it seems like it's hard to believe, but the crisis was 12 years ago. So I have to think the students are pretty young then, and they may not remember. Fannie Mae failed, and the government had to come in and bail it out. They fired the entire board. They fired the entire leadership team. They put the company under conservatorship, and it ended up taking about $100 billion of taxpayer money to right the ship. I was brought in as part of the turnaround team. I ran financial planning and forecasting. And this was I had always worked in large companies, but this was the first time that I had really worked with really large numbers. We had a $3.5 trillion book. That's 12 zeros.
Wow.
And in banking, the smallest unit of measure is a basis point. So it's 1/100th of 1%. And if you make an error of 1 basis point on a $3.5 trillion book, it's $350 million.
Oh.
So it was the first time that the magnitude of what I was doing really seemed to matter to our country. And I just sort of fell in love with being in and running a financial book that was that significant. So learned a lot in Washington, but it had its shelf life. I went to JP Morgan, and there I had a $1 trillion book of mortgage servicing rights, which is one of the most volatile assets in a bank. And I worked, so I got my Wall Street experience. That was great. And then one day I thought, I don't think I can work 80 hours a week until I'm 60. I probably ought to think about doing something else. So.
And what year are we in now?
That was 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Almost exactly 4 years ago. So my business partner called me the day before Halloween and said, hey, I'm coming to New York. I have an extra theater ticket. Do you want to go? And I said, no, but what are you doing? And she had reached a point in her career where she was ready for something different. And we talked for an hour. And at the end of the conversation, we were both going to quit our jobs and start a company. And we had no idea what the company was going to be. We just said, let's take our bonuses and let's go figure out how to make money on our own. So after 30 years in corporate America, we just jumped in the deep end.
Yeah. So can I just interject something, and then I'll have you continue. It is amazing to me how many people don't think entrepreneurs can happen in their mid-career.
Yeah.
Everybody's thinking it's the 20 and 30 somethings, which I know is the audience for this video, but you know, there are people like Ray Kroc and Sam Walton that started their enterprises after they were 50, and both those guys did, you know, pretty well. So from that standpoint, great for you, you know, mid-career to take the plunge, right? Yeah. You know, the stakes are a little more extreme if you're a little bit older, when you don't have maybe as many years to make up.
One of my heroes,
things don't go well, right?
Yeah, one of my heroes is Julia Child.
Oh, yeah.
And she did not publish that book until she was in her 50s. So she did not publish Mastering the Art of French Cooking until she was in her 50s. So she's another story of someone who started a business in their 50s. But I think it came down to, Bruce, I simply could not imagine sustaining that level of energy 10 more years after 30 years of it, because being on call 24/7 and working that kind of schedule and those kinds of demands on your life, it just gets to a point where you have broader interests and, you know, you've made your money and you want to go do something else. So we did.
That's so great. And so you just started 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is your business, and how did you come up with the idea, or you know, how'd you develop your business idea? What was that process?
So our business, it doesn't sound very exciting, but it has a twist. We have a small consulting practice. We focus on back office functions, so finance, human resources, technology, and regulatory compliance. The interesting and a special sauce about our business is that our labor model is we employ non-traditional consultants. So all of our consultants work about 20 hours a week. And what we have learned is that the corporate employment model is kind of a broken labor model, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. I think that Melinda Gates said it really well. She said, we're sending our daughters to work in a corporate environment that was constructed for their grandfathers. And the way that we live is no longer conducive to you know, two people working 80 hours a week, something's got to give. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how we arrived at this model, but what we like to say is, you know, we have a dual-sided marketplace. We have our clients, which are small to medium-sized companies, and then we match them up with experienced labor who do project by project work. What we like to tell our clients is we won't send you someone who is right out of school and is inexperienced. If you're implementing a new payroll system, we'll send you someone who's done that 3, 4, or 5 times. So we won't make you our guinea pig, and it's been really effective. And the other thing is because we keep our overhead really low. We started 4 years as a virtual company, so we never had any office space. We're able to price really competitively for these smaller organizations. So we go to about $500 million in revenue. We do nonprofits that are 100 million or over, and our average contract size is $100,000. So that's our business, and the way that we got there.
Consultants do you typically have on in your program?
So we have about 20 running at any one time.
Okay.
When we get to the end of the year, we have 10 to 15 that have worked, you know, kind of throughout the year. We came up with a really aggressive profit sharing strategy. So the folks that stay with us throughout the year, what we've committed to them is we did some research on the co-op model that a lot of companies in Europe have. And for the 10 or 15 that stay with us throughout the year, what we have committed is that we will retain capital in the business that we need for the first part of the following calendar year. So we're on a 12/31 year end. And then we bonus everything else out to ourselves and the rest of the staff. And it's all prorated back to the number of hours they work. But the point is, when we do that, we cap the multiple between the lowest compensated and the highest compensated employee, which is us, the partners. So if you think about Jamie Dimon and a teller, Jamie Dimon, the CEO and chairman of JP Morgan Chase, makes, I don't know, 1,000 times what a teller makes. And we have capped our compensation at 15 times what the lowest compensated employee will make. And right now we're less than 5.
Oh,
so on an hourly basis, we demonstrate that if you come in, even if you're only working 20 hours a week and you give us your very best, we will share in the profits of the company with you.
Yeah. When I was running my business, and one year our top sales guy, we were selling to large retailers like Walmart. And so my sales guy on the Walmart account just knocked it out of the park. And I think he made twice as much that year as I made. And somebody walked in and said, isn't that a problem for you? And I go, heck no. I mean, it's my company. The value of the business was going up. But, you know, maybe I didn't see the compensation that year, but, you know, they were all expecting I was going to take it away from them. And I go, no,
yeah,
it's not a good signal to your employees if you pull that kind of stuff. So,
that's why people stick around.
Yeah. Exactly.
Almost every consultant that's ever come to work with us, some of them have left because they were in transition and they needed a full-time job. But the ones who wanted to work part-time, we haven't had anyone leave. So I think that says something about our business model.
So did you have a business plan when you started your business, or did this just pop out of your head with your partner that night or when you got together?
So it's a funny story. So I ran financial planning for 3 Fortune 500 companies. So obviously we had a business plan. But what we did was we put 3 ideas in the air at any one time. And we started to eliminate those. We actually came up with a concept to float a new category of securities for supportive housing. That financial market is very inefficient. But what we found was this pool of assets. We kept coming across these people who were sitting on the sidelines and weren't working. And we thought, what if we put these people to work? What if we came up with a way to do that? So I modeled it out and we figured out what our revenue goals were by year, what our pricing strategy should be. We backed it into how many sales calls we would have to make, how many cold calls we would have to make to get enough leads to get the business that we wanted. And right up to COVID, we were hitting our revenue goals every year. And then COVID happened and things slowed down a little bit. But having a plan right out of the gate was huge. And so, you said something interesting at the beginning of the call. You said people think that, you can't make a move to an entrepreneurial career midway through your professional life. Well, what we found out is all those things that we learned in big companies have taught us a lot about how to run this business.
Yeah. Or how not to run
and
it.
how not to run it, how to manage risk. And so we've had a plan from day one.
So where are you in 3 years?
So 3 years from now, we reset our goals. We're just in the middle of planning. We want to be at 5 million in revenues. And we got some advice early on that a $5 million consulting business is a nice balance between your income, the balance you can keep in your life, the bureaucracy that you need to run the company. And so what we said is in 3 years, let's be at 5 million and reevaluate. If we're having fun and we're all happy with the amount of money we're making, we're not getting greedy. We're just saying, let's go serve our clients and do good and enjoy our lives and really love our work. And so we'll see. We might hit 5 million and say, gosh, this is fun. And we see a path where we could be at 50 million. So let's go to that. But
so is there an end in mind, or are you just going to keep doing this as long as you're making a difference and having fun and maybe making a little bit of money along the way? I mean,
my favorite podcast is Built to Sell. So I like to think about selling it. The reality is I'm 10 years older than my partner. So I have to imagine that I'll exit before she does. So we'll have to see how that works out. So.
You're sitting on that island with those umbrella drinks, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, Ann, I appreciate it. We're kind of coming up on our time. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with the students or lessons learned as they're watching our discussion today?
The last thing that I would leave them with is I'm unique. I experienced a corporate career and now I've done an entrepreneurial gig, and they're both hard. They're both really hard, but it seemed when I was working for a corporation, being an entrepreneur seemed more risky than working in a large corporation. And what I learned was it's like anything else. If you apply yourself and keep an open mind and stay flexible, being an entrepreneur is a lot about effort.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a perfect idea, and you don't have to be the next Airbnb to have a successful story as an entrepreneur. My partner and I support ourselves, pretty comfortably with a tidy little small business that we feel really passionately about. So don't be afraid of the risk of entrepreneurship. It's not always less risk to go work for, a larger employer.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd leave you with.
Well, thank you very much. Great wisdom, great journey. It was amazing. I didn't realize, and I've known you for a while, how much time you spent in the corporate world and the turnaround world and the $1 trillion number. That just blows my mind to now have moving into entrepreneurship at this phase. That's just spectacular. So.
It's fun.
So those of you students that, might be 20 years out of school before you start your business, it could happen to you. So
go for it.
Ann, thank you very much.
Thank you. All righty.
Have a good day.
You have a good day as well.